Hello, hello, hello! Hello, my fluffle friends. How you doing? Hello, Valeraine too. Good to see you. How you doing tonight? I'm doing something a little different this time. Tonight I'm going to be reading a story. Yeah. I'm going to be reading The Wind in the Willows. Great, Bunny, how about you? I'm doing good, yeah. So this is going to be the first time I've ever done an ASMR stream. Yeah, I'm going to be talking in a soft voice. That's kind of really the only ASMR part about it, I suppose. But yeah, I thought it would just be a nice cozy stream. Maybe help people get a little bit sleepy, a little bit relaxed, and yeah, hope everybody enjoys. Okay, so tonight I'll be reading The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. Yeah, story time. This is a book I have never actually read before. I've only seen like the cartoon, I think, adaptation of it. But it's one I've wanted to read for a long time, and this book was written over 100 years ago, which is just sort of crazy to think about, isn't it? But yeah, and it's considered a classic children's book as well, which is pretty interesting and cool. So yeah. Also, my VTuber model here, my mouth isn't working all that well. It's because of my lighting in the room that I'm in right now. But yeah, hopefully that won't bother anybody too much. Okay, so this version of The Wind in the Willows has an introduction by an author named Brian Jacques. And actually, when I was young, when I was a kid, I read one of his books called Mossflower, and it was like my favorite book for a long time, and I read it 3 times. But yeah, he's the author of the Redwall series, if you've ever heard of that before. Rosie Card, hello, hello, welcome in. How you doing tonight? Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're just about to start a little bit of ASMR story time. We're gonna read The Wind in the Willows. Yeah, welcome in. How you doing tonight? Okay, so this is the introduction by Brian Jacques. Oh, to sit on that riverbank an endless afternoon, inhaling the scent of long faded summers, where there is nothing, absolutely nothing, half so much worth doing as simply messing about in boats. More than half a century ago, Kenneth Grahame opened that small green door in an ivy-clad wall to me, an inner-city kid. I immediately fell under the spell of a world inhabited by anthropomorphic creatures dressed in outdated costume, 4 of whom became my lifelong friends. Ratty, every young person's favorite uncle, helpful, sympathetic, and ever courteous, a true gentle beast. How grateful Mole must have felt to have such a generous mentor as Ratty. Poor, humble little Mole, fumbling, unsure, and invariably homesick. Mole is every child who is afraid to speak out for him or herself. Imagine, then, 2 such mild-mannered types lost in the wild wood where villainous weasels lurk. Oh, those weasels, armed with clubs and daggers, some even brandishing blunderbusses. They stalk the unwary traveler. One can instantly identify a weasel. They snarl nastily, dress in stripy jerseys and greasy waistcoats. They wear flat-peaked caps too and carry gunny sacks marked swag. What an unsavory lot. Oh, you're on lunch break, yeah? I hope you have a good lunch break. That's crazy to think about. You must be in a very different part of the world than me. It's quite late where I am right now. Well, good. I hope you have a good lunch break. You can listen to a nice relaxing story while you eat your food. However, there is one whom Ratty and Mole can turn to in times of peril. One whom any weasel would run a league to avoid. Badger. Oh yes, imagine being a weasel pursued by Badger. That noble beast, clad in brogues plus fours, a Norfolk jacket, and brandishing a stout stick from his hall stand. Ha! You'd probably hie yourself to the nearest monastery, there to quickly reform your Weasley ways. Badger is the stalwart upholder of law within the wild wood. Stern and just, but kind and fatherly to Ratty and Mole. Badger's door, his fireside, dining board, and home are open to all honest creatures. I can recall reading again the scene where young mice, squirrels, and hedgehogs come caroling on a bleak winter's night. What a hearty supper Badger gives them, and what a jolly time Ratty and Mole have in assisting him. Hisano, Hisano, welcome in, my friend. Welcome, welcome. Meowdy. Welcome, welcome. How you doing tonight? We're currently reading the introduction to The Wind in the Willows, written by, the introduction is written by Brian Jacques, the author of the Redwall series. Let's see. The Wind in the Willows possesses that quintessential English charm and fascination for children of all ages, even mine. The turning seasons, the rolling countryside, with its streams, woodlands, meadows, and carefree open highways. Did I mention open highways? Poop, poop. I don't know why he said poop, poop, but apparently it's a thing. Poop, poop, I say. Here comes that wretch Mr. Toad, that reckless, notorious, adventurous, devil-may-care amphibian resident of stately Toad Hall. How can we resist Toad? He is Billy Bunter, Just William, and Dick Turpin with a dash of Bertie Wooster thrown in. I can't say I know who these people are, you guys. I don't know. Probably from other stories, I'm guessing. The complete bounder, gypsy of the open road, madcap motorist, and, in full fig as a washerwoman, jailbreaker extraordinaire. There has to be a little of Mr. Toad in every naughty child, for actually that's what Toad is, an eternal naughty boy. Not a villainous baddie or a criminal, Toad is merely the victim of his own capricious nature. He needs constantly bringing to heel. The difficult duty of Badger, Ratty, and Mole. Didn't we all feel sorry for Toad when he was thrown in prison? Aye, and didn't he feel twice as sorry for himself? But didn't we all cheer when, with a bound, he was free? Hurrah for the audacious Mr. Toad! Hurrah for all his friends, and a special hurrah for Mr. Kenneth Grahame. Well done, sir. Hurrah! All right. Chapter 1, The Riverbank. The mole had been working very hard all the morning, spring cleaning his little home. First with brooms, then with dusters, then on ladders and steps and chairs, with a brush and a pail of whitewash till he had dust in his throat and eyes, and splashes of whitewash all over his black fur, and an aching back and weary arms. Spring was moving in the air above and in the earth below and around him, penetrating even his dark and lowly little house with its spirit of divine discontent and longing. Let's see. It was small wonder, then, that he suddenly flung down his brush on the floor, said bother and oh blow, and also hang spring cleaning, and bolted out of the house without even waiting to put on his coat. Something up above was calling him imperiously, and he made for the steep little tunnel which answered, in his case, to the gravelled carriage drive owned by animals whose residences are nearer to the sun and air. So he scraped and scratched and scrabbled and scrooged, and then he scrooged again, and scrabbled and scratched and scraped, working busily with his little paws and muttering to himself, up we go, till at last, pop! His snout came out into the sunlight, and he found himself rolling in the warm grass of a great meadow. "This is fine," he said to himself. "This is better than whitewashing." The sunshine struck hot on his fur, soft breezes caressed his heated brow, and after the seclusion of the cellarage he had lived in so long, the carol of happy birds fell on his dulled hearing almost like a shout. Jumping off all his 4 legs at once, in the joy of living and the delight of spring without its cleaning, he pursued his way across the meadow till he reached the hedge on the further side. "Hold up," said an elderly rabbit at the gap. "6 pence for the privilege of passing by the private road." He was bowled over in an instant by the impatient and contemptuous mole, who trotted along the side of the hedge, chaffing the other rabbits as they peeped hurriedly from their holes to see what the row was about. Onion sauce," he remarked jeeringly, and was gone before they could think of a thoroughly satisfactory reply. Then they all started grumbling at each other. How stupid you are! Why didn't you tell him? Well, why didn't you say? You might have reminded him," and so on in the usual way. But, of course, it was then much too late, as is always the case. It all seemed too good to be true. Hither and thither through the meadows he rambled busily, along the hedgerows, across the copses, finding everywhere birds building, flowers budding, leaves thrusting, everything happy and progressive and occupied. And instead of having an uneasy conscience pricking him and whispering, "Whitewash," he somehow could only feel how jolly it was to be the only idle dog among all these busy citizens. After all, the best part of a holiday is perhaps not so much to be resting yourself as to see all the other fellows busy working. He thought his happiness was complete when, as he meandered aimlessly along, suddenly he stood by the edge of a full-fed river. Never in his life had he seen a river before. This sleek, sinuous, full-bodied animal, chasing and chuckling, gripping things with a gurgle, and leaving them with a laugh, to fling itself on fresh playmates that shook themselves free, and were caught and held again. All was a shake and a shiver, glints and gleams and sparkles, rustle and swirl, chatter and bubble. The mole was bewitched, entranced, fascinated. By the side of the river he trotted as one trots when very small by the side of a man who holds one spellbound by exciting stories. And when tired at last, he sat on the bank while the river still chattered on to him, a babbling procession of the best stories in the world, sent from the heart of the earth to be told at last to the insatiable sea. Alright guys, I gotta take a really quick break. I just gotta hydrate. I gotta drink my tea. I'm having, oh gosh, I can't remember what the brand is, but it's like a medicinal herbal tea. It's called throat coat tea. It's super tasty. Just a minute. Alright, that's much better. Okay. As he sat on the grass and looked across the river, a dark hole in the bank opposite, just above the water's edge, caught his eye, and dreamily he fell to considering what a nice snug dwelling place it would make for an animal with few wants and fond of a bijou riverside residence, above flood level and remote from noise and dust. As he gazed, something bright and small seemed to twinkle down in the heart of it, vanished, then twinkled once more like a tiny star. But it could hardly be a star in such an unlikely situation, and it was too glittering and small for a glowworm. Then, as he looked, it winked at him, and so declared itself to be an eye, and a small face began gradually to grow up around it, like a frame round a picture. A brown little face with whiskers, a grave round face with the same twinkle in its eye that had first attracted his notice. Small neat ears and thick silky hair. It was the water rat. Then the two animals stood and regarded each other cautiously. "Hello, Mole," said the water rat. "Hello, Rat," said the Mole. "Would you like to come over?" inquired the rat presently. "Oh, it's all very well to talk," said the Mole rather pettishly, he being new to a river and riverside life and its ways. The rat said nothing, but stooped and unfastened a rope and hauled on it, then lightly stepped into a little boat which the Mole had not observed. It was painted blue outside with white within, and was just the size for two animals, and the Mole's whole heart went out to it at once. Even though he did not fully understand its uses, the rat... Oh, I see. Even though he did not fully understand its uses. The rat sculled smartly across and made fast. Then he held up his forepaw as the Mole stepped gingerly down. "Lean on that," he said. "Now then, step lively." And the Mole, to his surprise and rapture, found himself actually seated in the stern of a real boat. "This has been a wonderful day," said he, as the rat shoved off and took to the sculls again. "Do you know, I've never been in a boat before in all my life." "What?" cried the rat, open-mouthed. "Never been in a... You never... Well, what have you been doing, then?" "Is it so nice as all that?" asked the Mole shyly, though he was quite prepared to believe it as he leaned back in his seat and surveyed the cushions, the oars, the rowlocks, and all the fascinating fittings, and felt the boat sway lightly under him. "Nice, it's the only thing," said the water rat solemnly, as he leant forward for his stroke. "Believe me, my young friend, there is nothing, absolutely nothing, half so much worth doing as simply messing about in boats. Simply messing," he went on dreamily, "messing about in boats. Messing. Look ahead, Rat," cried the Mole suddenly. It was too late. The boat struck the bank full tilt. The dreamer, the joyous oarsman, lay on his back at the bottom of the boat, his heels in the air. "About in boats or with boats," the rat went on composedly, picking himself up with a pleasant laugh. "In or out of 'em, it doesn't matter. Nothing seems really to matter. That's the charm of it. Whether you get away or whether you don't, whether you arrive at your destination or whether you reach somewhere else, or whether you never get anywhere at all, you're always busy and you never do anything in particular, and when you've done it, there's always something else to do. And you can do it if you like, but you'd much better not. Look here, if you've really nothing else on hand this morning, supposing we drop down the river together and have a long day of it." The Mole waggled his toes from sheer happiness, spread his chest with a sigh of full contentment, and leaned back blissfully into the soft cushions. "What a day I'm having," he said. "Let us start at once." "Hold hard a minute, then," said the rat. He looped the painter through a ring in his landing stage, climbed up into his hole above, and after a short interval reappeared staggering under a fat wicker luncheon basket. "Shove that under your feet," he observed to the Mole, as he passed it down into the boat. Then he untied the painter and took the sculls again. "What's inside it?" asked the Mole, wriggling with curiosity. "There's cold chicken inside it," replied the rat briefly. "Cold tongue, cold ham, cold beef, pickled gherkins, salad, French rolls, cress sandwiches, potted meat, ginger beer, lemonade, soda water." "Oh, stop, stop," cried the Mole in ecstasies. "This is too much." "Do you really think so?" inquired the rat seriously. "It's only what I always take on these little excursions, and the other animals are always telling me that I'm a mean beast and cut it very fine." The Mole never heard a word he was saying, absorbed in the new life he was entering upon, intoxicated with the sparkle, the ripple, the scents, and the sounds, and the sunlight. He trailed upon the water and dreamed long, waking dreams. The water rat, like the good little fellow he was, sculled steadily on and forbore to disturb him. "I like your clothes awfully, old chap," he remarked after some half an hour or so had passed. "I'm going to get a black velvet smoking suit myself some day, as soon as I can afford it." "I beg your pardon," said the Mole, pulling himself together with an effort. "You must think me very rude, but all this is so new to me. So this is a river. The river, corrected the rat. And you really live by the river? What a jolly life! By it, and with it, and on it, and in it, said the rat. It's brother and sister to me, and aunts, and company, and food, and drink, and, naturally, washing. It's my world, and I don't want any other. What it hasn't got, it's not worth having, and what it doesn't know is not worth knowing. Lord, the times we've had together, whether in winter or summer, spring or autumn, it's always got its fun and its excitements. When the floods are on in February, and my cellars and basement are brimming with drink that's no good to me, and the brown water runs by my best bedroom window, or again when it all drops away and shows patches of mud that smells like plum cake, and the rushes and weed clog the channels, and I can potter about dry shod over most of the bed of it, and find fresh food to eat, and things careless people have dropped out of boats. But isn't it a bit dull at times, the mole ventured to ask? Just you and the river, and no one else to pass a word with? No one else to... Well, I mustn't be hard on you, said the rat with forbearance. You're new to it, and of course you don't know. The bank is so crowded nowadays that many people are moving away altogether. Oh no, it isn't what it used to be at all. Otters, kingfishers, dabchicks, moorhens, all of them about all day long and always wanting you to do something, as if a fellow had no business of his own to attend to. What lies over there? Asked the mole, waving a paw towards a background of woodland that darkly framed the water meadows on one side of the river. That? Oh, that's just the wild wood, said the rat shortly. We don't go there very much, we riverbankers. Aren't they very nice people in there? Said the mole, a trifle nervously. Well, replied the rat, let me see. The squirrels are all right, and the rabbits, some of 'em, but rabbits are a mixed lot. And then there's Badger, of course. He lives right in the heart of it. Wouldn't live anywhere else either if you paid him to do it. Dear old Badger. Nobody interferes with him. They'd better not, he added significantly. Why, who should interfere with him? Asked the mole. Well, of course, there are others, explained the rat in a hesitating sort of way. Weasels, and stoats, and foxes, and so on. They're all right in a way. I'm very good friends with them. Past the time of day when we meet and all that. But they break out sometimes, there's no denying it, and then, well, you can't really trust them, and that's the fact. The mole knew well that it is quite against animal etiquette to dwell on possible trouble ahead, or even to allude to it, so he dropped the subject. And beyond the wildwood again, he asked, where it's all blue and dim, and one sees what may be hills, or perhaps they mayn't, and something like the smoke of towns, or is it only cloud drift? Beyond the wildwood comes the wide world, said the rat, and that's something that doesn't matter either to you or me. I've never been there, and I'm never going, nor you either, if you've got any sense at all. Don't ever refer to it again, please. Now then, here's our backwater at last, where we're going to lunch. Leaving the main stream, they now passed into what seemed at first sight like a little landlocked lake. Green turf sloped down to either edge, brown, snaky tree roots gleamed below the surface of the quiet water, while ahead of them the silvery shoulder and foamy tumble of a weir, arm in arm with a restless dripping mill wheel that held up in its turn a gray-gabled mill house, filled the air with a soothing murmur of sound, dull and smothery, yet with little clear voices speaking up cheerfully out of its intervals. It was so very beautiful that the mole could only hold up both forepaws and gasp, "Oh my, oh my, oh my." The rat brought the boat alongside the bank, made her fast, helped the still awkward mole safely ashore, and swung out the luncheon basket. The mole begged as a favor to be allowed to unpack it all by himself, and the rat was very pleased to indulge him, and to sprawl at full length on the grass and rest, while his excited friend shook out the tablecloth and spread it, took out all the mysterious packets one by one, and arranged their contents in due order. Still gasping, oh my, at each fresh revelation, When all was ready, the rat said, "Now pitch in, old fellow," and the mole was indeed very glad to obey, for he had started his spring cleaning at a very early hour that morning, as people will do, and had not paused for bite or sup, and he had been through a very great deal since that distant time, which now seemed so many days ago. "What are you looking at?" said the rat presently, when the edge of their hunger was somewhat dulled, and the mole's eyes were able to wander off the tablecloth a little. "I am looking," said the mole, "at a streak of bubbles that I see traveling along the surface of the water. That is a thing that strikes me as funny." "Bubbles? Oh-ho," said the rat, and chirruped cheerily in an inviting sort of way. A broad, glistening muzzle showed itself above the edge of the bank, and the otter hauled himself out and shook the water from his coat. "Greedy beggars," he observed, making for the provender. "Why didn't you invite me, Ratty?" "This was an impromptu affair," explained the rat. "By the way, my friend, Mr. Mole." "Proud, I'm sure," said the otter, and the two animals were friends forthwith. "Such a rumpus everywhere," continued the otter. "All the world seems out of the river today. I came up this backwater to try and get a moment's peace, and then stumble upon you fellows. At least, I beg pardon, I don't exactly mean that, you know." There was a rustle behind them proceeding from a hedge wherein last year's leaves still clung thick, and a stripy head with high shoulders behind it peered forth on them. "Come on, old badger," shouted the rat. The badger trotted forward a pace or two, then grunted, company," and turned his back and disappeared from view. "That's just the sort of fellow he is," observed the disappointed rat. "Simply hates society. Now we shan't any more of him today. Well, tell us, who's out on the river?" "Toad's out for one," replied the otter, "in his brand new wager boat, new togs, new everything." The two animals looked at each other and laughed. "Once it was nothing but sailing," said the rat. "Then he tired of that and took to punting. Nothing would please him but to punt all day and every day, and a nice mess he made of it. Last year it was houseboating, and we all had to go and stay with him in his houseboat and pretend we liked it. He was going to spend the rest of his life in a houseboat. It's all the same, whatever he takes up, he gets tired of it and starts in something fresh." "Oh, Rosie Card, I just saw that you said it's almost midnight. I didn't even think that maybe you had a night shift." I don't know why I hadn't thought of that. Let's see. Yes. "Such a good fellow, too," remarked the otter reflectively, "but no stability, especially in a boat." From where they sat, they could get a glimpse of the main stream across the island that separated them. And, let's see, just then a wager boat flashed into view, the rower, a short, stout figure, splashing badly and rolling a good deal, but working his hardest. The rat stood up and hailed him, but Toad, for it was he, shook his head and settled sternly to his work. "He'll be out of the boat in a minute if he rolls like that," said the rat, sitting down again. "Of course he will," chuckled the otter. "Did I ever tell you that good story about Toad and the lock-keeper? It happened this way. Toad—" An errant mayfly swerved steadily athwart the current in the intoxicated fashion affected by young bloods of mayflies seeing life. A swirl of water and a cloop, and the mayfly was visible no more. Neither was the otter. "All right, everybody, I need some more tea. Just a second, please." Okay, I'm back. Also, if I'm moving around a lot, it's because I'm trying to figure out how to make it so my camera can capture my face so that my mouth moves while I'm speaking. Otherwise, I'm kind of just a bun with somehow it's ventriloquism, you guys. Yeah, I don't have the best lighting where I am right now, and being that it's like dark and late, yeah, I'm gonna have to figure that out. But yeah, so hopefully the whole not mouth moving thing doesn't bother you too much. Nah, it's fine. Okay, good. But yeah, that's why I've been kind of like turning and moving. I'm like trying to figure out my camera. Okay, so let's see here. Where did I leave off? Let's see. Oh, yes. Okay, so we don't see the otter anymore. The otter went under the water. The mole looked down. The voice was still in his ears, but the turf whereon he had sprawled was clearly vacant. Not an otter to be seen as far as the distant horizon. But again there was a streak of bubbles on the surface of the river. The rat hummed a tune, and the mole recollected that animal etiquette forbade any sort of comment on the sudden disappearance of one's friends at any moment, for any reason or no reason whatsoever. Well, well, said the rat, I suppose we ought to be moving. I wonder which of us had better pack the luncheon basket. He did not speak as if he was frightfully eager for the treat. Oh, please, let me, said the mole, so of course the rat let him. Packing the basket was not quite such pleasant work as unpacking the basket. It never is. But the mole was bent on enjoying everything, and although just when he had got the basket packed and strapped up tightly, he saw a plate staring up at him from the grass, and when the job had been done again, the rat pointed out a fork which anybody ought to have seen, and last of all, behold, the mustard pot, which he had been sitting on without knowing it. Still, somehow, the thing got finished at last, without much loss of temper. The afternoon sun was getting low as the rat sculled gently homewards in a dreamy mood, murmuring poetry things over to himself, and not paying much attention to Mole. I like that term, poetry things. What are you reading? Oh, you know, just poetry things. Let's see. But the mole was very full of lunch and self-satisfaction and pride, and already quite at home in a boat, so he thought, and was getting a bit restless besides. And presently he said, Ratty, please, I want to row now. The rat shook his head with a smile. Not yet, my young friend, he said. Wait till you've had a few lessons. It's not so easy as it looks. The mole was quiet for a minute or two, but he began to feel more and more jealous of Rat, sculling so strongly and so easily along, and his pride began to whisper that he could do it every bit as well. He jumped up and seized the sculls so suddenly that the rat, who was gazing out over the water and saying more poetry things to himself, was taken by surprise and fell backwards off his seat with his legs in the air for the second time, while the triumphant mole took his place and grabbed the sculls with entire confidence. Stop it, you silly ass, cried the rat from the bottom of the boat. You can't do it, you'll have us over. The mole flung his sculls back with a flourish and made a great dig at the water. He missed the surface altogether, his legs flew up above his head, and he found himself lying on top of the prostrate rat. Greatly alarmed, he made a grab at the side of the boat, and the next moment, sploosh! Over went the boat, and he found himself struggling in the river. Oh my, how cold the water was, and oh, how very wet it felt! How it sang in his ears as he went down, down, down! How bright and welcome the sun looked as he rose to the surface, coughing and spluttering! How black was his despair when he felt himself sinking again! Then a firm paw gripped him by the back of his neck. It was the rat, and he was evidently laughing. The mole could feel him laughing, right down his arm and through his paw, and so into his, the mole's, neck. The rat got hold of a scull and shoved it under the mole's arm. Then he did the same by the other side of him, and, swimming behind, propelled the helpless animal to shore, hauled him out, and set him down on the bank, a squashy, pulpy lump of misery. When the rat had rubbed him down a bit and wrung some of the wet out of him, he said, Now then, old fellow, trot up and down the towing path as hard as you can till you're warm and dry again, while I dive for the luncheon basket." So the dismal mole, wet without and ashamed within, trotted about till he was fairly dry, while the rat plunged into the water again, recovered the boat, righted her and made her fast, fetched his floating property to shore by degrees, and finally dived successfully for the luncheon basket and struggled to land with it. When all was ready for a start once more, the mole, limp and dejected, took his seat in the stern of the boat, and as they set off, he said in a low voice, broken with emotion, "Ratty, my generous friend, I am very sorry indeed for my foolish and ungrateful conduct. My heart quite fails me when I think how I might have lost that beautiful luncheon basket. Indeed, I have been a complete ass, and I know it. Will you overlook it this once and forgive me, and let things go on as before?" That's all right, bless you," responded the rat cheerily. "What's a little wet to a water rat? I'm more in the water than out of it most days. Don't you think any more about it, and look here, I really think you had better come and stop with me for a little time. It's very plain and rough, and you know, not like Toad's house at all. But you haven't seen that yet. Still, I can make you comfortable, and I'll teach you to row and to swim, and you'll soon be as handy on the water as any of us." Ratty sounds like a nice friend. The mole was so touched by his kind manner of speaking that he could find no voice to answer him, and he had to brush away a tear or two with the back of his paw. But the rat kindly looked in another direction, and presently the mole's spirits revived again, and he was even able to give some straight back talk to a couple of moorhens who were sniggering to each other about his bedraggled appearance. When they got home, the rat made a bright fire in the parlor and planted the mole in an armchair in front of it, having fetched down a dressing gown and slippers for him, and told him river stories till supper time. Very thrilling stories they were, too, to an earth-dwelling animal like mole. Stories about weirs and sudden floods, and leaping pike, and steamers that flung hard bottles. At least bottles were certainly flung, and from steamers, so presumably by them. And about herons, and how particular they were whom they spoke to, and about adventurous down drains, and night fishings with otter, or excursions far afield with badger. Supper was a most cheerful meal, but very shortly afterwards a terribly sleepy mole had to be escorted upstairs by his considerate host to the best bedroom, where he soon laid his head on his pillow in great peace and contentment, knowing that his new-found friend, the river, was lapping the sill of his window. This day was only the first of many similar ones for the emancipated mole, each of them longer and fuller of interest as the ripening summer moved onward. He learnt to swim and to row, and entered into the joy of running water, and with his ear to the reed stems he caught, at intervals, something of what the wind went whispering so constantly among them. I really like this book so far. It's really, really sweet. Chapter 2, The Open Road. "Ratty," said the mole suddenly one bright summer morning, "if you please, I want to ask you a favor." The rat was sitting on the river bank, singing a little song. He had just composed it himself, so he was very taken up with it, and would not pay proper attention to mole or anything else. Since early morning he had been swimming in the river in company with his friends the ducks, and when the ducks stood on their heads suddenly, as ducks will, he would dive down and tickle their necks, just under where their chins would be if ducks had chins, till they were forced to come to the surface again in a hurry, spluttering and angry and shaking their feathers at him, for it is impossible to say quite all you feel when your head is under water. At last they implored him to go away and attend to his own affairs, and leave them to mind theirs. So the rat went away and sat on the river bank in the sun, and made up a song about them, which he called Duck's Ditty. Okay, I'm not even going to attempt to sing it, but we're gonna read it in this sort of sing-song way, I suppose. Duck's Ditty. All along the backwater, through the rushes tall, ducks are a-dabbling, up tails all. Ducks' tails, drakes' tails, yellow feet a-quiver, yellow bills all out of sight, busy in the river. Slushy green undergrowth where the roach swim, Here we keep our larder cool and full and dim. Everyone for what he likes. We like to be heads down, tails up, dabbling free. High in the blue above, swift whirl and call. Oh, swift swirl and call. We are down a dabbling, up tails all. It's super cute. I don't know that I think so very much of that little song, Rat, observed the mole cautiously. He was no poet himself and didn't care who knew it, and he had a candid nature. Nor don't the ducks neither, replied the rat cheerfully. They say, why can't fellows be allowed to do what they like when they like and as they like, instead of other fellows sitting on banks and watching them all the time and making remarks and poetry and things about them? What nonsense it all is, that's what the ducks say. So it is, said the mole with great heartiness. No, it isn't, cried the rat indignantly. Well then, it isn't, replied the mole soothingly. But what I wanted to ask you was, won't you take me to call on Mr. Toad? I've heard so much about him, and I do so want to make his acquaintance. Oh, welcome in, let's see, Hex, Maniac, Noel, yes, hello. Welcome to the chat, and welcome to the Fluffle. Thank you for the follow, by the way. Welcome. How are you doing tonight? We are reading The Wind in the Willows tonight. I'm doing a little bit of ASMR. Trying to anyway. This is my first attempt at it, but yeah. Decided to do a little bit of a cozy stream tonight. Let's see, it says, I'm doing well. I've been here for 30 seconds and this is already so soothing. Oh, I'm so glad. Yay. That makes me happy. Thank you. But yeah, welcome. Let's see here. Why, certainly, said the good-natured rat, jumping to his feet and dismissing poetry from his mind for the day. Get the boat out and we'll paddle up there at once. It's never the wrong time to call on Toad. Early or late, he's always the same fellow. Always good-tempered, always glad to see you, always sorry when you go. He must be a very nice animal, observed the mole, as he got into the boat and took the sculls, while the rat settled himself comfortably in the stern. Okay, I gotta drink a little bit of tea. Just a moment. Alright. So let's see here. He is indeed the best of animals, replied Rat. So simple, so good-natured, and so affectionate. Perhaps he's not very clever. We can't all be geniuses, and it may be that he is both boastful and conceited. But he has got some great qualities, has Toady. Rounding a bend in the river, they came in sight of a handsome, dignified old house of mellowed red brick, with well-kept lawns reaching down to the water's edge. There's Toad Hall, said the rat, and that creek on the left, where the notice board says, Private, no landing allowed, leads to his boathouse, where we'll leave the boat. The stables are over there to the right. That's the banqueting hall you're looking at now. Very old, that is. Toad is rather rich, you know, and this is really one of the nicest houses in these parts, though we never admit as much to Toad. They glided up the creek, and the moles shipped his sculls as they passed into the shadow of a larger boathouse. Here they saw many handsome boats slung from the cross beams or hauled up on a slip, but none in the water, and the place had an unused and deserted air. The rat looked around him. I understand, said he. Boating is played out. He's tired of it and done with it. I wonder what new fad he has taken up now. Come along and let's look him up. We shall hear all about it quite soon enough. They disembarked and strolled across the gay flower-decked lawns in search of Toad, whom they presently happened upon resting in a wicker garden chair, with a preoccupied expression of face and a large map spread out on his knees. Hooray! He cried, jumping up on seeing them. This is splendid! He shook the paws of both of them warmly, never waiting for an introduction to the mole. How kind of you, he went on, dancing round them. I was just going to send a boat down the river for you, Ratty, with strict orders that you were to be fetched up here at once, whatever you were doing. I want you badly, both of you. Now, what will you take? Come inside and have something. You don't know how lucky it is you're turning up just now. Let's sit quiet a bit, Toady, said the rat, throwing himself into an easy chair, while the mole took another by the side of him and made some civil remark about Toad's delightful residence. Finest house on the whole river, cried Toad boisterously, or anywhere else for that matter, he could not help adding. Here the rat nudged the mole. Unfortunately, the Toad saw him do it, and turned very red. There was a moment's painful silence. Then Toad burst out laughing. All right, Ratty, he said. It's only my way, you know, and it's not such a very bad house, is it? You know you rather like it yourself. Now look here, let's be sensible. You are the very animals I wanted. You've got to help me. It's most important. It's about your rowing, I suppose, said the rat, with an innocent air. You're getting on fairly well, though you splash a good bit still. With a great deal of patience and any quantity of coaching, you may— Oh, pooh! Boating, interrupted the Toad in great disgust. Silly boyish amusement. I've given that up long ago. Sheer waste of time, that's what it is. It makes me downright sorry to see you fellows, who ought to know better, spending all your energies in that aimless manner. No, I've discovered the real thing, the only genuine occupation for a lifetime. I propose to devote the remainder of mine to it, and can only regret the wasted years that lie behind me, squandered in trivialities. Come with me, dear Ratty, and your amiable friend also, if he will be so very good, just as far as the stable-yard, and you shall see what you shall see. He led the way to the stable-yard accordingly, the rat following with a most mistrustful expression, and there, drawn out of the coach-house into the open, they saw a gypsy caravan shining with newness, painted a canary yellow, picked out with green and red wheels. There you are, cried the Toad, straddling and expanding himself. There's real life for you, embodied in that little cart. The open road, the dusty highway, the heath, the common, the hedgerows, the rolling downs, camps, villages, towns, cities. Here today, up and off to somewhere else tomorrow. Travel, change, interest, excitement. The whole world before you, and a horizon that's always changing. And mind, this is the very finest cart of its sort that was ever built, without any exception. Come inside and look at the arrangements. Planned 'em all myself, I did. The mole was tremendously interested and excited, and followed him eagerly up the steps and into the interior of the caravan. The rat only snorted and thrust his hands deep into his pockets, remaining where he was. It was indeed very compact and comfortable. Little sleeping bunks, a little table that folded up against the wall, a cooking stove, lockers, bookshelves, a bird cage with a bird in it, and pots, pans, jugs, and kettles of every size and variety. So I am interested that he has a bird cage, but he's a toad. They're a toad and a rat and a mole. So I should think that the bird cage would be, like, really huge. And it doesn't seem quite right that they would have a bird in a cage. I don't know. All complete, said the Toad triumphantly, pulling open a locker. You see, biscuits, potted lobster, sardines. Everything you can possibly want. Soda water here, baccy there, letter paper, bacon, jam, cards, and dominoes. You'll find, he continued, as they descended the steps again, you'll find that nothing whatever has been forgotten when we make our starts this afternoon. I beg your pardon, said the rat slowly, as he chewed a straw, but did I overhear you say something about we, and start, and this afternoon? Now, you dear good old Ratty, said Toad imploringly, don't begin talking in that stiff and sniffy sort of way, because you know you've got to come. I can't possibly manage without you, so please consider it settled, and don't argue. It's the one thing I can't stand. You surely don't mean to stick your dull, fusty old river all over your life, Okay, I gotta say this one again. You surely don't mean to stick your dull, fusty old river all your life, and just live in a hole in a bank and boat? I want to show you the world. I'm going to make an animal of you, my boy. I don't care, said the rat doggedly. I'm not coming, and that's flat. And I am going to stick to my old river and live in a hole and boat, as I've always done. And what's more, Mole's going to stick to me and do as I do, aren't you, Mole? Of course I am, said the Mole loyally. I'll always stick to you, Rat, and what you say is to be has got to be. All the same, it sounds as if it might have been, well, rather fun, you know, he added wistfully. Poor Mole, the life adventurous was so new a thing to him and so thrilling, and this fresh aspect of it was so tempting, and he had fallen in love at first sight with the canary-colored cart and all its little fitments. The cart actually does sound super, super cute. The Rat saw what was passing in his mind and wavered. He hated disappointing people, and he was fond of the Mole and would do almost anything to oblige him. Toad was watching both of them closely. Come along in and have some lunch, he said diplomatically, and we'll talk it over. We needn't decide anything in a hurry. Of course, I don't really care. I only want to give pleasure to you fellows. Live for others. That's my motto in life. I have a feeling that's not true. During luncheon, which was excellent, of course, as everything at Toad Hall always was, the Toad simply let himself go. Disregarding the Rat, he proceeded to play upon the inexperienced Mole as on a harp. Naturally a voluble animal, and always mastered by his imagination, he painted the prospects of the trip and the joys of the open life and the roadside in such glowing colors that the Mole could hardly sit in his chair for excitement. Somehow it soon seemed taken for granted by all three of them that the trip was a settled thing, and the Rat, though still unconvinced in his mind, allowed his good nature to override his personal objections. He could not bear to disappoint his two friends, who were already deep in schemes and anticipations, planning out each day's separate occupation for several weeks ahead. When they were quite ready, the now triumphant Toad led his companions to the paddock and set them to capture the old gray horse who, without having been consulted, and to his own extreme annoyance, had been told off by Toad for the dustiest job in this dusty expedition. He frankly preferred the paddock and took a deal of catching. Meantime, Toad packed the lockers still tighter with necessaries, and hung nosebags, nets of onions, bundles of hay, and baskets from the bottom of the cart. At last the horse was caught and harnessed, and they set off, all talking at once, each animal either trudging by the side of the cart or on the shaft as the humor took him. It was a golden afternoon. The smell of the dust they kicked up was rich and satisfying. Out of thick orchards on either side the road, birds called and whistled to them cheerily. Good-natured wayfarers passing them gave them good day, or stopped to say nice things about their beautiful cart, and rabbits, sitting at their front doors in the hedgerows, held up their forepaws and said, "Oh my, oh my, oh my." Late in the evening, tired and happy, and miles from home, they drew up on a remote common far from habitations, turned the horse loose to graze, and ate their simple supper, sitting on the grass by the side of the cart. Toad talked big about all he was going to do in the days to come, while stars grew fuller and larger all around them, and a yellow moon, appearing suddenly and silently from nowhere in particular, came to keep them company and listen to their talk. At last they turned into their little bunks in the cart, and Toad, kicking out his legs, sleepily said, "Well, good night, you fellows. This is the real life for a gentleman. Talk about your old river." "I don't talk about my river," replied the patient Rat. "You know I don't, Toad. But I think about it," he added pathetically in a lower tone. "I think about it all the time." Ah, he misses the river. The Mole reached out from under his blanket, felt for the Rat's paw in the darkness, and gave it a squeeze. "I'll do whatever you like, Ratty," he whispered. "Shall we run away tomorrow morning, quite early, very early, and go back to our dear old hole on the river?" "No, no, we'll see it out," whispered back the Rat. "Thanks awfully, but I ought to stick by Toad till this trip is ended. It wouldn't be safe for him to be left to himself. It won't take very long. His fads never do. Good night." They are the sweetest of friends. I love that so much. The end was indeed nearer than even the Rat suspected. After so much open air and excitement, the Toad slept very soundly, and no amount of shaking could rouse him out of bed next morning. So the Mole and Rat turned to... Oh, just a second. I gotta hydrate. Alright. Oh. I picked my book up and I was holding it upside down. Okay, let's see. After so much open air and excitement, the toad... Oh yes, we read this part, didn't we? Okay. So the mole and rat turned to, quietly and manfully, and while the rat sawed to the horse and lit a fire, and cleaned last night's cups and platters, and got things ready for breakfast, the mole trudged off to the nearest village, a long way off. For milk and eggs and various necessaries, the toad had, of course, forgotten to provide. The hard work had all been done, and the two animals were resting, thoroughly exhausted by the time Toad appeared on the scene, fresh and gay, remarking what a pleasant, easy life it was they were all leading now, after the cares and worries and fatigues of housekeeping at home. They had a pleasant ramble that day over grassy downs and along narrow by-lanes, and camped, as before, on a common, only this time the two guests took care that Toad should do his fair share of work. In consequence, when the time came for starting next morning, Toad was by no means so rapturous about the simplicity of the primitive life, and indeed attempted to resume his place in his bunk, whence he was hauled by force. Their way lay, as before, across country by narrow lanes, and it was not till the afternoon that they came out on the high road, their first high road, and there disaster, fleet and unforeseen, sprang out on them. Disaster momentous indeed to their expedition, but simply overwhelming in its effect on the after career of Toad. They were strolling along the high road easily, the mole by the horse's head, talking to him, since the horse had complained that he was being frightfully left out of it, and nobody considered him in the least. The toad and the water rat walking behind the cart talking together. At least Toad was talking, and Rat was saying at intervals, "Yes, precisely, and what did you say to him?" and thinking all the time of something very different, when far behind them they heard a faint warning hum, like the drone of a distant bee. Glancing back, they saw a small cloud of dust with a dark center of energy advancing on them at incredible speed, while from out of the dust a faint poop-poop wailed like an uneasy animal in pain. Hardly regarding it, they turned to resume their conversation, when in an instant, as it seemed, the peaceful scene was changed, and with a blast of wind and a whirl of sound that made them jump for the nearest ditch, it was on them, the poop-poop ringing with a brazen shout in their ears. They had a moment's glimpse of an interior of glittering plate glass and rich morocco, and the magnificent motor car, immense, breath-snatching, passionate, with its pilot tense and hugging his wheel, possessed all earth and air for the fraction of a second, flung an enveloping cloud of dust that blinded and enwrapped them utterly, and then dwindled to a speck in the far distance, changed back into a droning bee once more. The old grey horse, dreaming as he plodded along of his quiet paddock and a new raw situation such as this, simply abandoned himself to his natural emotions. Rearing, plunging, backing steadily, in spite of all the mole's efforts at his head, and all the mole's lively language directed at his better feelings, he drove the cart backwards towards the deep ditch at the side of the road. It wavered an instant, then there was a heart-rending crash, and the canary-colored cart, their pride and their joy, lay on its side in the ditch, an irredeemable wreck. Oh no! The rat danced up and down in the road, simply transported with passion. "You villains!" he shouted, shaking both fists. "You scoundrels! You highwaymen! You road hogs! I'll have the law on you! I'll report you! I'll take you through all the courts!" His homesickness had quite slipped away from him, and for the moment he was the skipper of the canary-colored vessel, driven on a shoal by the reckless jockeying of rival mariners, and he was trying to recollect all the fine and biting things he used to say to masters of steam launches when their wash, as they drove too near the bank, used to flood his parlor carpet at home. Rat is having quite a fit. As he should, as he should. That car tried to run them right off the road. Well, it did run them right off the road. Toad sat straight down in the middle of the dusty road, his legs stretched out before him, and stared fixedly in the direction of the disappearing motor car. He breathed short, his face wore a placid, satisfied expression, And at intervals he faintly murmured, "Poop, poop." Why does it have to be poop, poop, though? The mole was busy trying to quiet the horse, which he succeeded in doing after a time. Then he went to look at the cart on its side in the ditch. It was indeed a sorry sight. Panels and windows smashed, axles hopelessly bent, one wheel off, sardine tins scattered over the wide world, and the bird in the birdcage sobbing pitifully and calling to be let out. Yes, why is this bird in a cage? I don't think I'm okay with this, you guys. Why? Why is he in a cage? The rat came to help him, but their united efforts were not sufficient to right the cart. "Hi, Toad," they cried. "Come and bear a hand, can't you?" The poor bird, lol. I know, right? Like, this bird must be just as big as they are, right? And they just have him in a cage. I don't think it's good, you guys. I don't think it's good. The toad never answered a word or budged from his seat in the road, so they went to see what was the matter with him. They found him in a sort of trance, a happy smile on his face, his eyes still fixed on the dusty wake of their destroyer. At intervals, he was still heard to murmur, "Poop, poop." The rat shook him by the shoulder. "Are you coming to help us, Toad?" he demanded sternly. "Glorious, stirring sight," murmured Toad, never offering to move. "The poetry of motion, the real way to travel, the only way to travel. Here today, and the next week tomorrow. Villages skipped, towns and cities jumped. Always somebody else's horizon. Oh bliss, oh poop poop, oh my, oh my." Oh my goodness. "Oh, stop being an ass, Toad," cried the mole despairingly. "And to think I never knew," went on the toad in a dreamy monotone. "All those wasted years that lie behind me, I never knew, never even dreamt. But now that I know, now that I fully realize, oh, what a flowery track lies spread before me henceforth. What dust clouds shall spring up behind me as I speed on my reckless way. What carts I shall fling carelessly into the ditch in the wake of my magnificent onset. Horrid little carts, common carts, canary-colored carts." He's really obsessed with this car now. "What are we to do with him?" asked the mole of the water rat. "Nothing at all," replied the rat firmly, "because there is really nothing to be done. You see, I know him from of old. He is now possessed. He has got a new craze, and it always takes him that way in its first stage. He'll continue like that for days now, like an animal walking in a happy dream, quite useless for all practical purposes. Never mind him. Let's go and see what there is to be done about the cart." A careful inspection showed them that, even if they succeeded in riding it by themselves, the cart would travel no longer. The axles were in a hopeless state, and the missing wheel was shattered into pieces. The rat knotted the horse's reins over his back and took him by the head, carrying the birdcage and its hysterical occupant in the other hand. "Come on," he said grimly to the mole. "It's 5 or 6 miles to the nearest town, and we shall just have to walk it. The sooner we make a start, the better." So this bird apparently is quite small, because the rat can hold the cage with one hand. I feel sorry for it. Just let it free already. Let's see. What about Toad? Asked the mole anxiously as they set off together. "We can't leave him here, sitting in the middle of the road by himself. In the distracted state he's in, it's not safe. Supposing another thing were to come along." "Oh, bother Toad," said the rat savagely. "I've done with him." They had not proceeded very far on their way, however, when there was a pattering of feet behind them, and Toad caught them up and thrust a paw inside the elbow of each of them, still breathing short and staring into vacancy. "Now, look here, Toad," said the rat sharply. "As soon as we get to town, you'll have to go straight to the police station and see if they know anything about that motor car and who it belongs to, and lodge a complaint against it. And then you'll have to go to a blacksmith's or a wheelwright's and arrange for the cart to be fetched and mended and put to rights. It'll take time, but it's not quite a hopeless smash. Meanwhile, the mole and I will go to an inn and find comfortable rooms where we can stay till the cart's ready, until your nerves have recovered from their shock. Police station? Complaint? Murmured Toad dreamily. Me complain of that beautiful, that heavenly vision that has been... Oh goodness, this is a word I don't know, guys. That has been... Oh, vouchsafed me. Yes. Okay. This is what happens when I read a book that's over 100 years old. I don't understand all the words, you guys. What is vouchsafed? Yes, okay. Mend the cart? I've done with carts forever. I never want to see the cart or to hear of it again. Oh, Ratty, you can't think of how obliged I am to you for consenting to come on this trip. I wouldn't have gone without you, and then I might... Okay, hold on. I wouldn't have gone without you, and then I might never have seen that swan, that sunbeam, that thunderbolt. I might never have heard that entrancing sound, or smelt that bewitching smell. I owe it all to you, my best of friends. I don't think Ratty's gonna be very happy about this. Can't say I've heard that word either. I know, right? These are some old-timey words. The rat turned from him in despair. You see what it is, he said to the mole, addressing him across Toad's head. He's quite hopeless. I give it up. When we get to the town, we'll go to the railway station, and with luck we may pick up a train there that'll get us back to Riverbank tonight. And if you ever catch me a-pleasuring with this provoking animal again, he snorted, and during the rest of that weary trudge addressed his remarks exclusively to Mole. He just gave Toad the cold shoulder. On reaching the town, they went straight to the station and deposited Toad in the second-class waiting room, giving a porter 2p to keep a strict eye on him. They then left the horse at an inn stable and gave what directions they could about the cart and its contents. Eventually, a slow train having landed them at a station not very far from Toad Hall, they escorted the spellbound, sleepwalking Toad to his door, put him inside it, and instructed his housekeeper to feed him, undress him, and put him to bed. Oh my. He is much, much too enthralled with this vehicle, I think. Can't even undress his own self. Then they got out their boat from the boathouse, sculled down the river home, and at a very late hour sat down to supper in their own cozy riverside parlor, to the rat's great joy and contentment. The following evening, the mole, who had risen late and taken things very easy all day, was sitting on the bank fishing when the rat, who had been looking up his friends and gossiping, came strolling along to find him. Heard the news, he said. There's nothing else being talked about, all along the riverbank. Toad went up to town by an early train this morning, and he has ordered a large and very expensive motor car. I feel like Toad should not be driving a motor car. I'm just gonna say that right now. I don't think he's responsible enough, and I'm sure shenanigans will ensue. I'm gonna take a really quick break, guys. I need to actually go get a glass of water. I've run out of tea, unfortunately. I'll be right back. returned. Okay, so we are on Chapter 3, The Wild Wood. Alright, the mole had long wanted to make the acquaintance of the badger. He seemed, by all accounts, to be such an important personage and, though rarely visible, to make his unseen influence felt by everybody about the place. But whenever the mole mentioned his wish to the water rat, he always found himself put off. "It's all right," the rat would say. "Badger'll turn up some day or other. He's always turning up, and then I'll introduce you. The best of fellows, but you must not only take him as you find him, but when you find him." "Couldn't you ask him here? Dinner or something?" said the mole. "He wouldn't come," replied the rat simply. "Badger hates society, and invitations, and dinner, and all that sort of thing." "Well then, supposing we go and call on him," suggested the mole. "Oh, I'm sure he wouldn't like that at all," said the rat, quite alarmed. "He's so very shy, he'd be sure to be offended. I've never even ventured to call on him at his own home myself, though I know him so well. Besides, we can't. It's quite out of the question, because he lives in the very middle of the wild wood." "Well, supposing he does," said the mole. "You told me the wildwood was all right, you know." "Oh, I know, so it is," replied the rat evasively. "But I think we won't go there just now. Not just yet. It's a long way, and he wouldn't be at home at this time of year anyhow, and he'll be coming along some day if you'll wait quietly." The mole had to be content with this, but the badger never came along, and every day brought its amusements, and it was not till summer was long over, and cold and frost and miry ways kept them much indoors, and the swollen river raced past outside their windows with a speed that mocked at boating of any sort or kind, that he found his thoughts dwelling again with much persistence on the solitary gray badger who lived his own life by himself in his hole in the middle of the wild wood. In the winter-time the rat slept a great deal, retiring early and rising late. During his short day he sometimes scribbled poetry or did other small domestic jobs about the house, and, of course, there were always animals dropping in for a chat, and consequently there was a good deal of storytelling and comparing notes on the past summer and all its doings. Such a rich chapter it had been when one came to look back on it all, with illustrations so numerous and so very highly colored. The pageant of the river bank had marched steadily along, unfolding itself in scene pictures that succeeded each other in stately procession. Purple loosestrife arrived early, shaking luxuriant tangled locks along the edge of the mirror whence its own face laughed back at it. Willow herb, tender and wistful, like a pink sunset cloud, was not slow to follow. Comfrey, the purple hand in hand with the white, crept forth to take its place in the line, and at last one morning the diffident and delaying dog Rose stepped delicately on the stage, and one knew, as if string music had announced it in stately chords that strayed into a gavotte, that June at last was here. One member of the company was still awaited, the shepherd boy for the nymphs to woo, the knight for whom the ladies waited at the window, the prince that was to kiss the sleeping summer back to life and love. But when Meadowsweet, debonair and odorous in amber jerkin, moved graciously to his place in the group, then the play was ready to begin. Those were very flowery words. I couldn't help but make a pun. It's true, though, that was actually really beautifully written. And what a play it had been. Drowsy animals, snug in their holes while wind and rain were battering at their doors, recalled still, keen mornings, an hour before sunrise, when the white mist, as yet undispersed, clung closely along the surface of the water. Then the shock of the early plunge, the scamper along the bank, and the radiant transformation of the earth, air, and water, when suddenly the sun was with them again, and gray was gold, and color was born and sprang out of the earth once more. They recalled the languorous siesta of hot midday, deep in green undergrowth, the sun striking through in tiny golden shafts and spots, The boating and bathing of the afternoon, the rambles along dusty lanes and through yellow cornfields, and the long, cool evening at last, when so many threads were gathered up, so many friendships rounded, and so many adventures planned for the morrow. There was plenty to talk about on those short winter days when the animals found themselves round the fire. Still, the mole had a good deal of spare time on his hands, and so one afternoon, when the rat in his armchair before the blaze was alternately dozing and trying over rhymes that wouldn't fit, he formed the resolution to go out by himself and explore the wild wood, and perhaps strike up an acquaintance with Mr. Badger. It was a cold, still afternoon, with a hard, steely sky overhead, when he slipped out of the warm parlor into the open air. The country lay bare and entirely leafless around him, and he thought that he had never seen so far and so intimately into the insides of things as on that winter day, when nature was deep in her annual slumber and seemed to have kicked the clothes off. Copses, dells, quarries, and all hidden places, which had been mysterious mines for exploration in leafy summer, now exposed themselves and their secrets pathetically, and seemed to ask him to overlook their shabby poverty for a while, till they could riot in rich masquerade as before, and trick and entice him with the old deceptions. It was pitiful in a way, and yet cheering, even exhilarating. He was glad that he liked the country undecorated, hard and stripped of its finery. He had got down to the bare bones of it, and they were fine and strong and simple. He did not want the warm clover and the play of seeding grasses, the screens of quickset, the billowy drapery of beech and elm seemed best away, and with great cheerfulness of spirit he pushed on towards the wild wood, which lay before him low and threatening, like a black reef in some still southern sea. Oh, hello, hello, hello! Oh my goodness! Thank you so much for the raid! Let's see, was it Nebu? Yes, thank you so much for the raid, Nebu! Welcome in, welcome! Hello, Luigio! Hello, hello, welcome in! Woohoo! How's the ASMRing? The ASMRing is going well! At least I hope so! I don't know, you guys tell me! But yeah, this is, yes, thank you so much for the raid. Oh, you know what? Hold on, let me give a shout out really quick here. Everybody, please follow Nebu Pookins. Nebu does some really fun streams. Let's see here. Here we go. There we go. Thank you for the raid. Thank you so much. Yeah, so we are reading The Wind in the Willows, and this is my first time reading this book. Yeah, it's a really old book, and I've wanted to read it since forever, basically, but yeah, this is my first time reading it. Let's see. Nebby says, as long as you haven't died or got stuck on any bosses, you're probably doing fine. That's right, I haven't got stuck on any bubbles this time, Nebu. Yeah. But yeah, this book is actually really good so far. I like it a whole lot. I like the characters, and yeah, it's just like really well written. I suppose it's a classic for a reason. You missed it, Nebu, but the introduction was written by Brian Jacques, who wrote the Redwall series. I don't know if you're familiar with those books. But yeah. Okay, so right now, our friend Mole in the story is trying to explore the forest and find Badger because he's never met Badger before. Wait, really? Oh yeah, you like the Redwall books. Hex Maniac Noel. Yeah. Yeah, so I read, when I was really young, I read Mossflower, which was the prequel to Redwall. And I read it 3 times. I loved it so much. And I started Redwall, but I don't think I ever finished it. But I have like 3 of the books. I think I have Muriel of Redwall and Madame Mio, and of course Mossflower. And my copy of Mossflower is the same one I had when I was little, so it's all like really, worn. But yeah, they're really good. I should read more of them. And I can definitely see how Brian Jacques was inspired by this book. Yeah, I can definitely make the connection there. Let's see. So let's see. Okay, I'm just trying to find my spot in the book again. I should put my finger on the words next time. Oh, here we go. Okay. There was nothing to alarm him at first entry. Twigs crackled under his feet, logs tripped him, funguses on stumps resembled caricatures, and startled him for the moment by their likeness to something familiar and far away. But that was all fun and exciting. It led him on, and he penetrated to where the light was less, and trees crouched nearer and nearer, and holes made ugly mouths at him on either side. Everything was very still now. The dusk advanced on him steadily, rapidly, gathering in behind and before, and the light seemed to be draining away like floodwater. Then the faces began. It was over his shoulder, and indistinctly, that he first thought he saw a face, a little evil wedge-shaped face, looking out at him from a hole. When he turned and confronted it, the thing had vanished. He quickened his pace, telling himself cheerfully not to begin imagining things, or there would be simply no end to it. He passed another hole, and another, and then yes, no, yes, certainly a little narrow face, with hard eyes, had flashed up for an instant from a hole, and was gone. He hesitated, braced himself up for an effort, and strode on. Then suddenly, as if it had been so all the time, every hole, far and near, and there were hundreds of them, seemed to possess its face, coming and going rapidly, and fixing on him glances of malice and hatred, all hard-eyed and evil and sharp. If he could only get away from the holes in the banks, he thought, there would be no more faces. He swung off the path and plunged into the untrodden places of the wood. Uh-oh. He's getting scared and not following the trail. Don't venture off the trail, guys. It's never a good idea. Alright, just a moment. I need to take a sip of water. Alright. Then the whistling began. Very faint and shrill it was, and far behind him, when first he heard it, but somehow it made him hurry forward. Then, very still, faint and shrill, it sounded far ahead of him, and made him hesitate and want to go back. As he halted in indecision, it broke out on either side, and seemed to be caught up and passed on throughout the whole length of the wood to its furthest limit. They were up and alert and ready, evidently, whoever they were, and he was alone and unarmed and far from any help, and the night was closing in. Then the pattering began. He thought it was only falling leaves at first, so slight and delicate was the sound of it. Then, as it grew, it took a regular rhythm, and he knew it for nothing else but the pat-pat-pat of little feet, still a very long way off. Was it in front or behind? It seemed to be first one, then the other, then both. It grew and it multiplied, till from every quarter, as he listened anxiously, leaning this way and that, it seemed to be closing in on him. As he stood still to hearken, a rabbit came running hard towards him through the trees. He waited, expecting it to slacken pace, or to swerve from him into a different course. Instead, the animal almost brushed him as it dashed past. His face set and hard, his eyes staring. "Get out of this, you fool, get out!" the mole heard him mutter as he swung round a stump and disappeared down a friendly burrow. Uh-oh. The pattering increased till it sounded like sudden hail on the dry leaf carpet spread around him. The whole wood seemed running now, running hard, hunting, chasing, closing in round something or somebody. In panic, he began to run too, aimlessly, he knew not whither. He ran up against things, he fell over things and into things, he darted under things and dodged round things. At last he took refuge in the dark, deep hollow of an old beech tree, which offered shelter, concealment, perhaps even safety, but who could tell? Anyhow, he was too tired to run any further and could only snuggle down into the dry leaves which had drifted into the hollow and hope he was safe for the time. And as he lay there panting and trembling and listened to the whistlings and the patterings outside, he knew it at last, in all its fullness, that dread thing which other little dwellers in field and hedgerow had encountered here, and known as their darkest moment, that thing which the rat had vainly tried to shield him from, the terror of the wild wood. Meantime, the rat, warm and comfortable, dozed by his fireside. His paper of half-finished verses slipped from his knee, his head fell back, his mouth opened, and he wandered by the verdant banks of dream rivers. Then a coal slipped, the fire crackled, and sent up a spurt of flame, and he woke with a start. Remembering that he had been engaged upon, he reached down to the floor for his verses, pored over them for a minute, and then looked round for the mole to ask him if he knew a good rhyme for something or other, but the mole was not there. He listened for a time. The house seemed very quiet. Then he called "Molly" several times, and, receiving no answer, got up and went out into the hall. The mole's cap was missing from its accustomed peg. His galoshes, which always lay by the umbrella stand, were also gone. The rat left the house and carefully examined the muddy surface of the ground outside, hoping to find the mole's tracks. There they were, sure enough. The galoshes were new, just bought for the winter, and the pimples on their soles were fresh and sharp. He could see the imprints of them in the mud, running along straight and purposeful, leading direct to the wild wood. The rat looked very grave and stood in deep thought for a minute or two. Then he re-entered the house, strapped a belt round his waist, shoved a brace of pistols into it, and took up a stout cudgel that stood in a corner of the hall, and set off for the wild wood at a smart pace. It was already getting towards dusk when he reached the first fringe of trees and plunged without hesitation into the wood, looking anxiously on either side for any sign of his friend. Here and there wicked little faces popped out of holes, but vanished immediately at sight of the valorous animal, his pistols, and the great ugly cudgel in his grasp. He is ready for a fight. And the whistling and pattering which he had heard quite plainly on his first entry died away and ceased, and all was very still. He made his way manfully through the length of the wood to its furthest edge. Then, forsaking all paths, he set himself to traverse it, laboriously working over the whole ground, and all the time calling out cheerfully, "Molly, Molly, Molly, where are you? It's me, it's old Rat." He had patiently hunted through the wood for an hour or more, when at last to his joy he heard a little answering cry. Guiding himself by the sound, he made his way through the gathering darkness to the foot of an old beech tree, with a hole in it, and from out of the hole came a feeble voice, saying, "Ratty, is that really you?" The rat crept into the hollow, and there he found the mole, exhausted and still trembling. "Oh, Rat," he cried, "I've been so frightened, you can't think." "Oh, I quite understand," said the rat soothingly. "You shouldn't really have gone and done it, Mole. I did my best to keep you from it. We riverbankers, we hardly ever come here by ourselves. If we have to come, we come in couples at least, then we're generally all right. Besides, there are 100 things one has to know, which we understand all about and you don't as yet. I mean passwords and signs and sayings which have power and effect, and plants you carry in your pocket, and verses you repeat, and dodges and tricks you practice. All simple enough when you know them, but they've got to be known if you're small, or you'll find yourself in trouble. Of course, if you were Badger or Otter, it would be quite another matter." "Surely the brave Mr. Toad wouldn't mind coming here by himself, would he?" inquired the Mole. "Old Toad," said the rat, laughing heartily. "He wouldn't show his face here alone, not for a whole hatful of golden guineas, Toad wouldn't." The Mole was greatly cheered by the sound of Rat's careless laughter, as well as by the sight of his stick and his gleaming pistols, and he stopped shivering and began to feel bolder and more himself again. "Now then," said the rat presently, "we really must pull ourselves together and make a start for home while there's still a little light left. It will never do to spend the night here, you understand. Too cold, for one thing." "Dear Ratty," said the poor Mole, "I'm dreadfully sorry, but I'm simply dead beat, and that's a solid fact. You must let me rest here a while longer and get my strength back, if I'm to get home at all." "Oh, all right," said the good-natured rat. "Rest away. It's pretty nearly pitch dark now anyhow, and there ought to be a bit of a moon later." So the mole got well into the dry leaves and stretched himself out and presently dropped off into sleep, though of a broken and troubled sort, while the rat covered himself up too as best he might for warmth and lay patiently waiting with a pistol in his paw. When at last the mole woke up, much refreshed and in his usual spirits, the rat said, "Now then, I'll just take a look outside and see if everything's quiet, and then we really must be off." He went to the entrance of the retreat and put his head out. Then the mole heard him saying quite quietly to himself, "Hello, hello, here is a go." "What's up, Ratty?" asked the mole. "Snow is up," replied the rat briefly, "or rather down. It's snowing hard." The mole came and crouched beside him, and, looking out, saw the wood that had been so dreadful to him in quite a changed aspect. Holes, hollows, pools, pitfalls, and other black menaces to the wayfarer were vanishing fast, and a gleaming carpet of fairy was springing up everywhere, that looked too delicate to be trodden upon by rough feet. A fine patter filled the air and caressed the cheek with a tingle in its touch, and the black boles of the trees showed up in a light that seemed to come from below. "Well, well, it can't be helped," said the rat after pondering. "We must make a start and take our chance, I suppose. The worst of it is, I don't exactly know where we are, and now this snow makes everything look so very different." It did indeed. The mole would not have known that it was the same wood. However, they set out bravely and took the line that seemed most promising, holding on to each other and pretending with invincible cheerfulness that they recognized an old friend in every fresh tree that grimly and silently greeted them, or saw openings, gaps, or paths with a familiar turn in them in the monotony of white space and black tree trunks that refused to vary. An hour or two later, they had lost all count of time. They pulled up, dispirited, weary, and hopelessly at sea, and sat down on a fallen tree trunk to recover their breath and consider what was to be done. They were aching with fatigue and bruised with tumbles. They had fallen into several holes and got wet through. The snow was getting so deep that they could hardly drag their little legs through it, and the trees were thicker and more like each other than ever. There seemed to be no end to this wood, and no beginning, and no difference in it, and worst of all, no way out. Okay, I gotta hydrate again. Just a moment. Hydrate time, that's right. It's very important. Let's see. Oh yes. "We can't sit here very long," said Rat. "We shall have to make another push for it, and do something or other. The cold is too awful for anything, and the snow will soon be too deep for us to wade through." He peered about him and considered. "Look here," he went on. "This is what occurs to me. There's a sort of dell down there in front of us, where the ground seems all hilly and humpy and hummocky. We'll make our way down into that and try and find some sort of shelter, a cave or hole with a dry floor to it, out of the snow and the wind, and there we'll have a good rest before we try again. For we're both of us pretty dead beat. Besides, the snow may leave off or something may turn up." So once more they got on their feet and struggled down into the dell, where they hunted about for a cave or some corner that was dry and a protection from the keen wind and the whirling snow. They were investigating one of the hummocky bits that the rat had spoken of, when suddenly the mole tripped up and fell forward on his face with a squeal. "Oh, my leg!" he cried. "Oh, my poor shin!" And he sat up on the snow and nursed his leg in both his front paws. "Poor old mole," said the rat kindly. "You don't seem to be having much luck today, do you? Let's have a look at the leg. Yes," he went on, going down on his knees to look, "you've cut your shin, sure enough. Wait till I get at my handkerchief, and I'll tie it up for you." "I must have tripped over a hidden branch or a stump," said the mole miserably. "Oh my, oh my." "It's a very clean cut," said the rat, examining it again attentively. "That was never done by a branch or a stump. Looks as if it was made by a sharp edge of something in metal. Funny," he pondered a while, and examined the humps and slopes that surrounded them. Well, never mind what done it, said the mole, forgetting his grammar in his pain. It hurts just the same, whatever done it. But the rat, after carefully tying up the leg with his handkerchief, had left him and was busy scraping in the snow. He scratched and shoveled and explored, all four legs working busily, while the mole waited impatiently, remarking at intervals, "Oh, come on, rat." Suddenly the rat cried, "Hooray!" and then, "Hooray, hooray, hooray, hooray!" and fell to executing a feeble jig in the snow. "What have you found, Ratty?" asked the mole, still nursing his leg. "Come and see," said the delighted rat as he jigged on. The mole hobbled up to the spot and had a good look. "Well," he said at last slowly, "I see it right enough. Seen the same sort of thing before, lots of times. Familiar object, I call it. A door scraper. Well, what of it? Why dance jigs around a door scraper?" "But don't you see what it means, you dull-witted animal?" cried the rat impatiently. "Of course I see what it means," replied the mole. "It simply means that some very careless and forgetful person has left his door scraper lying about in the middle of the wildwood, just where it's sure to trip everybody up. Very thoughtless of him, I call it. When I get home, I shall go and complain about it to somebody or other, see if I don't." Oh dear, cried the rat in despair at his obtuseness. "Here, stop arguing and come and scrape." And he set to work again and made the snow fly in all directions around him. After some further toil, his efforts were rewarded, and a very shabby doormat lay exposed to view. "There, what did I tell you?" exclaimed the rat in great triumph. "Absolutely nothing whatever," replied the mole with perfect truthfulness. "Well now," he went on, "you seem to have found another piece of domestic litter, done for and thrown away, and I suppose you're perfectly happy. Better go ahead and dance your jig round that if you've got to, and get it over, and then perhaps we can go on and not waste any more time over rubbish heaps. Can we eat a doormat, or sleep under a doormat, or sit on a doormat, and sledge home over the snow on it, you exasperating rodent?" I think they're having a bit of a tiff. "Do you mean to say," cried the excited rat, "that this doormat doesn't tell you something? Or tell you anything?" "Really, rat," said the mole quite pettishly, "I think we've had enough of this folly. Who ever heard of a doormat telling anyone anything? They simply don't do it. They are not that sort at all. Doormats know their place." Oh, that's so rude. Now look here. At least, I don't think he meant it to be rude. It does sound rude, though. "Now look here, you thick-headed beast," replied the rat, really angry. "This must stop. Not another word, but scrape and scratch and dig and hunt round, especially on the sides of the hummocks, if you want to sleep dry and warm tonight, for it's our last chance." "Why doesn't Ratty just tell them what it is?" The rat attacked a snow bank beside them with ardor, probing with his cudgel everywhere, and then digging with fury. And the mole scraped busily too, more to oblige the rat than for any other reason, for his opinion was that his friend was getting light-headed. Some 10 minutes' hard work, and the point of the rat's cudgel struck something that sounded hollow. He worked till he could get a paw through and feel, then called the mole to come and help him. Hard at it went the two animals, till at last the result of their labors stood full in view of the astonished and hitherto incredulous mole. In the side of what had seemed to be a snowbank stood a solid-looking little door, painted a dark green. An iron bell pull hung by the side, and below it, on a small brass plate, neatly engraved in square capital letters, they could read by the aid of moonlight, "Mr. Badger." Let's see here. Hold on just a second, guys. I got a little bit of spam that I've got to take care of. Let's see here. Okay. Alright. Sorry about that. Okay. The mole fell backwards on the snow from sheer surprise and delight. "Rat," he cried in penitence, "you're a wonder, a real wonder, that's what you are. I see it all now. You argued it out step by step in that wise head of yours from the very moment that I fell and cut my shin, and you looked at the cut, and at once your majestic mind said to itself, door scraper, and then you turned to and found the very door scraper that done it. Did you stop there? No, some people would have been quite satisfied, but not you. Your intellect went on working. Let me only just find a doormat, says you to yourself, and my theory is proved. And of course you found your doormat. You're so clever, I believe you could find anything you liked. Now, says you, that door exists as plain as if I saw it. There's nothing else remains to be done but to find it. Well, I've read about that sort of thing in books, but I've never come across it before in real life. You ought to go where you'll be properly appreciated. You're simply wasted here among us fellows. If only I had your head, Ratty. But as you haven't, interrupted the rat rather unkindly, I suppose you're going to sit on the snow all night and talk. Get up at once and hang on to that bell pull you see there, and ring hard as you can, while I hammer. While the rat attacked the door with his stick, the mole sprang up at the bell pull, clutched it, and swung there, both feet well off the ground, and from quite a long way off they could faintly hear a deep-toned bell respond. I just love their back and forth. Ratty and Mole are like the most adorable friends ever, and it's super cute and I love it. Alright everybody, we are on chapter 4 called Mr. Badger, and this is actually where I'm going to leave off the story tonight. Yeah. Thanks everybody for coming in. Good to see some new faces here. And yeah, no, I know Nebu, you just got here too. Yeah, but it's pretty late and I need to get some sleep. Thank you, oh thank you. Oh, I'm glad you liked it, yay. Thanks for coming in, Hex Maniac Noel. And yeah, good to meet ya. Thanks for joining the Fluffle family. And yeah, I hope everybody has a wonderful night/day. Aw, thanks Nebu, that's so kind of you to say. Yeah, I really want to do this again. So I'm really looking forward to it. And I hope you guys have a good rest of your night and sleep well. Take care everybody, bye!